चलिए आज हम नेक्स्ट चैप्टर दैट इज़ ऑर्गेनिज्म एंड पॉपुलेशन का एनसीईआरटी लाइन बाय लाइन रीड आउट करते हैं। आवर लिविंग वर्ल्ड इज़ फैसिनेटिंग, डाइवर्स एंड अमेजिंगली कॉम्प्लेक्स. We can try to understand its complexity by investigating process at a various level of biological organization. That is macromolecules, cell, tissues, organs, individual organisms, population, communities, ecosystem and biomes. At any level of biological organization, we can ask two type of a question. How does the bird sing, or why does bird sing? The how type questions seek the mechanism behind the process, while the why type questions seek the significance of the process. For the first question, the answer might be in terms of operation of voice box and vibrating bone in the bird. Whereas for second question, the answer may lie in the significance of the process. The second question, the answer may lie in the bird read to communicate with its mate during the breeding season. When you observe nature around you with scientific frame of mind, you will certainly come up with many interesting questions of both types. Why are night blooming flowers generally white? Why does bee know? How does bee know which flower has a nectar? And why does cactus have so many thorns? And how does the chick spears recognize her own mother? And so on. Ecology is a subject which studies the interaction among organisms and between the organism and its physical abiotic environment. Ecology is a basically concept with four levels of biological organization. That is organism, population, communities and biomes. Ecology at an organismic level is essentially physiological ecology, which tries to understand how different organisms are adapted to their environment in terms of not only survival but also reproduction. Rotation of our planet around the sun and tilt of its axis cause annual variation in the intensity and duration of temperature, resulting in distinct seasons. This variation, together with annual variation in precipitation includes both rain and snow, account for formation of a major biomes such as desert, rain, forest and tundra. Regions and local variation within each biome lead to formation of a wide variety of habitats. Major biomes of India are desert, grassland, tropical forest, temperate forest, coniferous forest, Arctic and alpine tundra. These all are in 6 in number. On a planet Earth, life exists not just in a few favorable habitats but even in extreme and harsh habitats. Scorching Rajasthan desert, rain-soaked Meghalaya forest, deep ocean trenches, and stinking compost pits, to name a few. Even our intestine is a unique habitat for the hundred of species of microbes. Key element that led to so much variation in physical and chemical condition of different habitat. The most important one are temperature, water, light, and soil. Physico-chemical abiotic component alone do not characterize the habitat of an organism completely. The habitat include biotic components also, that is pathogen, parasites, predators and competitors of an organism with which they interact constantly. We assume that over a period of a time the organism had, through natural selection, evolved adaptation to optimize its survival and reproduction in its habitat. Each organism has an invariably defined range of a condition that it can tolerate, diversity in the resources it utilizes, and distinct functional role in ecological system. All this together comprise its niche. Temperature is the most important ecologically relevant environmental factor. Average temperature on a land varies seasonally, decreases progressively from equator towards the pole and from plains to the mountain tops. It ranges from sub-zero level in the polar areas and high altitude to greater than 50 degrees Celsius in tropical desert in summer. There are unique habitats such as thermal spring and deep sea hydrothermal vents where average temperature exceeds 100 degrees Celsius. Mango trees do not and cannot grow in temperate countries like Canada and Germany. Snow leopard are not found in Kerala forest, and tuna fish are rarely caught beyond tropical altitude in the ocean. You can appreciate significance of temperature to living organism when you realize that it affects kinetics of enzymes and through it the metabolic activity and other physiological function of organism. The few organisms can tolerate and thrive in wide range of a temperature called eurythermal, but a vast majority of them are restricted to narrow range of a temperature called stenothermal. The level of thermal tolerance of a different species determine to the large extent their geographical distribution. Water is another the most important factor influencing the life of organism. In fact, life on earth originates in water and is unsustainable without water. Its availability is so limited in desert that only special adaptation make it possible for organism to live there. Productivity and distribution of a plant is also heavily dependent on water. You may think that organisms living in ocean, lakes and rivers should not face any water related problem, but it is not true, because for aquatic organism the quality, that is chemical composition or pH of water, becomes important. The salt concentration measured as salinity parts per thousand is less than 5 in island waters, 30 to 35 in the sea and greater than 100 in some hypersaline lagoons. Some organisms are tolerant of a wide range of salinities, that is euryhaline, but others are restricted to narrow range, that is they are stenohaline. Many freshwater animals cannot live for long in sea water and vice versa. Because of osmotic problems they would face, so they cannot be live in the sea water for a long. Some animals. Light. Since plant produce food through photosynthesis, so we can quickly understand the importance of a light for living organism, particularly autotrophs. Many species of a small plants, that is herbs and shrubs growing in a forest, are adapted to photosynthesize optimally under very low light condition because they are constantly overshadowed by tall canopied trees. Many plants are also dependent on sunlight to meet their photoperiodic requirement for flowering. For many animals too, light is important in that they use the diurnal and seasonal variation in a light, reproductive and migratory activities. The availability of a light on a land is closely linked with that of temperature, since the sun is the source for both. But deep, that is greater than 500 meter in the oceans, the environment is dark and its inhabitants are not aware of existence of celestial source of energy called sun. What then is their source of energy? Species quality of a solar radiation is also an important for life. The UV component of a spectrum is harmful for many organisms. While not all the color components of a visible spectrum are available for marine plants living at different depths of ocean. Among red, green and brown algae that inhabit the sea, which is likely to be found in deepest water and why? तो वैसे बात है शायद हमारे पास रेड algae डीप में रहता है. The nature and properties of a soil in different places vary. It is dependent on climate, the weathering process, whether soil is transported or sedimentary, and how soil development occurred. Various characteristics of a soil such as soil composition, grain size and aggregation determine the percolation and water holding capacity of the soil. These characteristics along with the parameters such as pH, mineral composition and topography determine to large extent the vegetation in any area. This in turn dictates the type of animal that can be supported. Similarly, in aquatic environment, the sediment characteristic often determine the type of a benthic animals that can thrive there. Having realized that abiotic condition of many habitats may vary drastically in time, we now ask how do the organisms living in such habitat cope or manage with stressful condition? Why a highly variable external environment should bother organism at all? One would expect that during a course of millions of years of their existence, many species would have evolved a relatively constant internal, that is within the body environment that permits our biochemical reaction and physiological function to proceed with a maximal efficiency and thus enhance overall fitness of the species. This constancy, for example, could be in terms of optical temperature and osmotic concentration of a body fluid. Ideally, then, the organism should try to maintain the constancy of internal environment, a process called homeostasis. Despite varying environment that tend to upset its homeostasis, let us take an analogy to clarify this important concept. Suppose a person is able to perform his or her best when the temperature is 25 degrees Celsius and wishes to maintain it so even when it is scorchingly hot or freezingly cold outside. It could be achieved at home, in a car while traveling, and at workplace by using air conditioner in summer and heater in winter. This his or her performance would be always maximal regardless of weather around him or her. Here person homeostasis is accomplished not through physiological but artificial means. Regulate. Some organisms are able to maintain homeostasis by the physiological, sometimes behavioral also means which ensure constant body temperature, constant osmotic concentration, etc. All birds and mammals and a very few lower vertebrate and invertebrate species are indeed capable of such regulation. Thermoregulation and osmoregulation. Evolutionary biologists believe that success of a mammals is largely due to their ability to maintain constant body temperature and thrive whether they live in Antarctica or in Sahara Desert. The mechanism used by most mammals to regulate their body temperature are similar to the one that we human use. We maintain a constant body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. In summer, when outside temperature is more than our body temperature, we sweat profusely. The resulting evaporative cooling, similar to what happens with a desert cooler in operation, brings down the body temperature. In winter, when temperature is much lower than 37 degrees Celsius, we start to shiver, a kind of exercise which produces heat and raises body temperature. Plants do not have mechanism to maintain such internal temperature. Confirm. An overwhelming majority, 99% of animals and nearly all plants cannot maintain a constant internal environment. Their body temperature changes with the ambient temperature. In aquatic animals, the osmotic concentration of a body fluids change with that of the ambient air, water osmotic concentration. These animals and plants are simply conformers. Considering the benefits of constant internal environment to the organism, we must ask why these conformers had not evolved to become regulator. Recall the human analogy we used above, much as they like how many people can really afford an air conditioner. Many simply sweat it out and resign themselves to suboptimal performance in a hot summer month. Thermoregulation is energetically expensive for many organisms. This is particularly true for small animals like shrews and hummingbirds. Heat loss or heat gain is a function of surface area. Since the small animals have longer surface area relative to their volume, they tend to lose body heat very fast when it is cold outside. Then they have to expend much energy to generate body heat through metabolism. This is the main reason why very small animals are rarely found in polar regions. In last slide there was a correction. Major biomes of India are not 6. They are tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, desert and seacoast. That is, they are only 4 and not 6. 6 तो हमारे पास वाला पर्टिकुलर ग्राफ में दैट इज मीन एनुअल प्रेसिपिटेशन एंड मीन एनुअल टेम्परेचर का. During the course of evolution, the cost and benefits of maintaining a constant internal environment are taken into consideration. Some species have evolved the ability to regulate but only over a limited range of environmental condition, beyond which they simply conform. If the stressful external conditions are localized or remain only for shorter duration, the organism has the two other alternatives for survival. First is migrate and second is suspend. Migrate. The organism can move away temporarily from the stressful habitat to the more hospitable area and return when stressful period is over. In human analogy, this strategy is like a person moving from Delhi to Shimla for the duration of summer. Many animals, particularly birds, during winter undertake long distance migration to more hospitable areas. Every winter, the famous Keolado National Park, that is in Bharatpur in Rajasthan, hosts thousands of migratory birds coming from Siberia and other extremely cold northern regions. Suspend. In bacteria, fungi and lower plants, various kinds of thick wall spores are formed which help them to survive unfavorable conditions. These germinate on availability of suitable environment. In higher plants, seeds and some other vegetative reproductive structure serve as a means to tide over periods of stress besides helping in dispersal. They germinate to form new plant under favorable moisture and temperature condition. They do so by reducing their metabolic activity and going into a state of dormancy. In animals, the organism, if unable to migrate, might avoid the stress by escaping the time. The familiar case of a bear going into hibernation during winter is an example of escape in time. Some snail and fish go into estivation to avoid summer-related problems, heat and desiccation. Under unfavorable conditions, many zooplankton species in lakes and ponds are known to enter diapause, a stage of suspended development. While considering the various alternatives available to organisms for coping with extreme in their environment, we have seen that some are able to respond through certain physiological adjustment, while others do so behaviorally, migrating temporarily to the less stressful habitat. These responses are also actually their adaptation. So we can say that adaptation is any attribute of the organism, morphological, physiological or behavioral, that enables organism to survive and reproduce in its habitat. Many adaptations have evolved over a long evolutionary time and are genetically fixed. In absence of an external source of water, the kangaroo rat in North American desert is capable of meeting all its water requirement through its internal fat oxidation, in which water is a byproduct. It also has the ability to concentrate its urine so that minimal volume of the water is used to remove excretory product. Many desert plants have thick cuticle on their leaf surface and have their stomata arranged in a deep pits sunken to minimize water loss through transpiration. They also have special photosynthetic pathway, that is CAM pathway, that enables their stomata to remain closed during daytime. Some desert plants like open shea have no leaves. They are reduced to spines and the photosynthetic function is taken over by flattened stems. Mammals from the colder climate generally have shorter ear and limbs to minimize heat loss. This is called Allen's rule. In polar seas, aquatic mammals like seals have thick layer of a fat, that is blubber, below their skin that act as an insulator and reduces loss of body heat. Some organisms possess adaptations that are physiological, which allow them to respond quickly to the stressful situation. If you had ever been to any high altitude place that is greater than 3500 meter, Rotang greater than 3500 meter, Rotang pass near Manali and Leh, you must have experienced what is called altitude sickness. Its symptoms include nausea, fatigue, and heart palpitation. This is because in low atmospheric pressure of a high altitude, the body does not get enough oxygen, but gradually you get acclimatized and stop experiencing altitude sickness. The body compensates low oxygen availability by increasing RBC production, decreasing binding affinity of hemoglobin, and by increasing breathing rate. Many tribes live in the high altitude of the Himalayas. They have higher RBC count or total hemoglobin than the people living in plains. In most animals, the metabolic reaction and hence all the physiological function proceeds optimally in a narrow temperature range. In humans, it is 37 degrees Celsius, but there are microbes, archaebacteria, that flourish in hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents, where temperature far exceeds 100 degrees Celsius. How is this possible? Many fish thrive in Antarctic water where temperature is always below zero. How do they manage to prevent their body fluids from freezing? A large variety of marine invertebrates and fish live at a great depth in the ocean where the pressure should be greater than 100 times the normal atmospheric pressure. How do they live under such high pressure, and do they have any special enzyme? Organisms living in such extreme environments show the fascinating array of biochemical adaptation. Some organisms show behavioral response to cope up with a variation in their environment. Desert lizard lack physiological ability that mammals have to deal with high temperature of their habitat, but manage to keep their body temperature fairly constant by behavioral means. They bask in sun and absorb heat when their body temperature drops below comfort zone, but move into shade when their body temperature drops below the comfort zone, but move into shade when the ambient temperature starts increasing. Some species are capable of burrowing into the soil to hide and escape from above ground heat. Population attribute. In nature, we rarely find isolated single individuals of any species. Majority of them live in a groups in a well-defined geographical area, share or compete for similar resources, potentially interbreed and thus constitute a population. Although the term interbreeding implies sexual reproduction, a group of individuals resulting from even asexual reproduction is also generally considered a population for a purpose of ecological studies. All the cormorants in the wetland, rat in the abundant dwellings, teakwood trees in a forest track, bacteria in a culture plate and lotus plant in a pond are some example of population. Although an individual organism is the one that has to cope with a change in environment, it is at a population level that the natural selection operates to evolve desired traits. Population ecology is therefore an important area because it links ecology to population genetics and evolution. A population has certain attributes, whereas an individual organism does not. An individual may have birth and death, but a population has a birth rate and death rate. In a population, these rates refer to per capita birth and deaths. The rates hence expressed are change in number, increase or decrease with respect to the members of population. Example, if in a pond there were 20 lotus plants last year and through reproduction 8 new plants were added, taking the current population to 28, we calculate a birth rate has 8 upon 20, that is 0.4 offspring per lotus per year. If a 4 individual in a laboratory population of a 40 fruit flies died during a specified time interval, say a week, the death rate of a population during that period is 4 upon 40, that is 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per week. Another attribute characteristic of a population is a sex ratio. An individual is either male or female, but a population has a sex ratio. Example, 60% of a population are females and 40% are males. A population at any given time is composed of individuals of different ages. If a age distribution percent individual of a given age or a age group is plotted for a population, the resulting structure is called age pyramid. For human population, the age pyramid generally shows age distribution of male and females in a diagram. The shape of a pyramid reflects the growth status of a population, that is whether it is growing or stable or declining. The size of a population tells us a lot about its status in habitat. Whatever ecological process we wish to investigate in a population, be it the outcome of competition with the another species, the impact of a predator or the effect of a pesticide application, we always evaluate them in terms of any change in the population size. Size in nature could be as low as less than 10, that is Siberian cranes at a Bharatpur wetlands in any year, or go into millions, that is Calamadomonas in a pond. Population size, technically called population density, designated as n, need not necessarily be measured in numbers only. Although total number is generally the most appropriate measure of a population density, it is in some cases either meaningless or difficult to determine. In an area, if there are 200 carrot grass, that is Parthenium hysterophorus, कैरेट ग्रास का जो साइंटिफिक नाम है पार्थेनियम हिस्टेरोफोरस plant, but only a single huge banyan tree with a large canopy, stating that population density of a banyan is low relative to that of carrot grass, amounts to underestimating the enormous role of a banyan in that community. In such cases, the percent cover or a biomass is more meaningful measure of a population size. Total number is again not an easily adaptable measure if the population is huge and counting is impossible or very time consuming. If you have dense laboratory culture of a bacteria in a petri dish, what is the best measure to report its density? Sometimes for certain ecological investigation there is no need to know absolute population density. Relative density serve the purpose equally well. For instance, the number of a fish caught per trap is a good enough measure of its total population density in the lake. We are mostly obliged to estimate population size indirectly, without actually counting them or seeing them. The tiger census in our national park and tiger reserves is often based on pug mark and fecal pellets. Size of a population for any species is not a static parameter. It keeps changing with the time, depending on various factors including food availability, predation pressure, and adverse weather. It is these changes in population density that give us some idea of what is happening to a population, whether it is flourishing or declining. Whatever might be ultimate reason, the density of a population in a given habitat during a given period fluctuates due to changes in four basic processes, two of which, natality and eye migration, contribute to an increase in population density, and two, that is mortality and immigration, to a decrease. First is natality, refers to the number of a birth during the given period in a population that are added to the initial density. Second is mortality, that is number of a death in a population during a given period. Eye migration, number of individuals of a same species that have come into the habitat from elsewhere during the time period under consideration. Immigration, number of individuals of a population who left the habitat and gone elsewhere during the time period under consideration. If n is a population density at a time t, then its density at a time t plus 1 is what? That is n t plus 1 equal to n at time t plus birth plus I migration minus death plus E migration. You have seen from the above equation that population density will increase if the number of a birth plus the number of I migrants, that is birth plus I migration, is more than that of number of a deaths plus number of immigrants. Immigrant is, that is death plus immigration. Under normal condition, birth and death are the most important factors influencing population density. The other two factors assuming importance only under special condition. For instance, if a new habitat is just being colonized, I migration may contribute more significantly to the population growth than the birth rate. Growth model. Does the growth of a population with a time shows any specific and predictable pattern? We have been concerned about unbridled human population growth and problems created by it in our country, and it is therefore natural for us to be curious if different animal population in nature behave the same way or show some restraints on the growth. Perhaps we can learn a lesson or two from nature on how to control population growth. Exponential growth. Resource, that is food and space availability, is obviously essential for the unimpeded growth of a population. Ideally, when the resources in the habitat are unlimited. Each species has the ability to realize fully its innate potential to grow in number, as Darwin observed while developing his theory of natural selection. Then the population grows in an exponential or geometric fashion. If in a population of a size n, the birth rate, not total number but per capita births, are represented as B, and the death rate again per capita death rate has D, then the increase or decrease in n during a time during a unit time period, that is dn by dt will be dn by dt equal to b minus d into n. Let b minus d equal to r, then dn upon dt equal to rn. R in this equation is called intrinsic rate of a natural increase and is a very important parameter chosen for assessing impacts of any biotic or abiotic factor on population growth. R of Norway rat is 0.015. Flower beetle is 0.12. In 1981, the R value for the human population in India was 0.0205. Above equation describes exponential or a geometric growth pattern of the population and result in J-shaped curve when we plotted n in relation to time. With basic calculus, you can derive integral form of exponential growth equation as nt equal to n naught e की power rt, where nt is population density after time t, n naught is population density at time 0, r is intrinsic rate of a natural increase, and e is a base of a natural logarithms, that is 2.71828. Any species growing exponentially under unlimited resource condition can reach enormous population density in a short time. Darwin shows how even a slow growing animal like elephant could reach enormous number in absence of checks. The following is anecdote popularly narrated to demonstrate dramatically how fast a huge population could build up when growing exponentially. 1 grain in square 1, second in square 2, 4 in square 3 and 8 in square 4 and so on, doubling each time the previous quantity of a wheat on the next square until all the 64 squares are filled of a chess game. Now think of the tiny paramecium starting with just one individual and through binary fission doubling in number every day, and imagine what a mind-blogging population size it could be reached in 64 days provided food and space remain unlimited. Here was a one graph in which x-axis there was a time and on y-axis there was a population density represented as n. K is a carrying capacity. सिग्मोइड कर्व का जो हमारे पास इक्वेशन है वो हमारे पास है dn अपॉन dt इक्वल टू आर एन के माइनस एन अपॉन एन, वेयर के इज ए कैरिंग कैपेसिटी. एंड एक्सपोनेंशियली जो हमारे पास ग्राफ में दिख रहा है उसका इक्वेशन है हमारे पास dn अपॉन dt इक्वल टू आर एन. पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ कर्व जो हमारे पास ये वाला है, दैट इज व्हेन रिस्पॉन्स आर नॉट लिमिटिंग द ग्रोथ प्लॉट इज एक्सपोनेंशियल. When responses are limiting the growth plot is logistic, where k is a carrying capacity. तो हमारे पास इस वाले पर्टिकुलर ग्राफ में ये वाला जो पर्टिकुलर है हमारे पास इसे सपोज हम मान लेते हैं when the resources are not limiting the growth plot is exponential. इसे हम a मान लेते हैं एंड इसे हम b मान लेते हैं. तो जब हमारे पास ए वाले केस में हमारे पास क्या है, रिस्पॉन्सेस लिमिटिंग नहीं है एंड बी वाले में हमारे पास रिस्पॉन्सेस लिमिटिंग है. Logistic growth. No population of any species in nature has at its disposal unlimited resources to permit exponential growth. This leads to competition between individuals for limited resources. Eventually, the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. The government of many countries have also realized this fact and introduced various restraints with a view to limit human population growth. In nature, a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. Let us call this limit as nature's carrying capacity K for that species in that habitat. A population growing in the habitat with a limited resources show initially a lag phase, followed by the phase of acceleration and deceleration, and finally an asymptote. When the population density reaches the carrying capacity, a plot of a n in relation to time t result in a sigmoid curve. This type of a population growth is called Walsh-Pearl logistic growth and is described by following equation. That is dn by dt equal to Rn k minus n upon k, where n equal to population density at time t, r is the intrinsic rate of a natural increase. Since resources for the growth for the most animal population are finite and become limiting sooner or later, the logistic growth model is considered a more realistic one. Gather from government census data the population figures of for India for the last 100 years. Plot them and check which growth pattern is evident. Life history variation. Population evolved to maximize their reproductive fitness, also called Darwinian fitness, high or that is high R value, in the habitat in which they live. Under a particular set of a selection pressure, organisms evolve toward the most efficient reproductive strategy. Some organisms breed only once in their lifetime, example Pacific salmon, fish or bamboo, while the other breed many times during their lifetime, that is most birds and mammals. Some produce a large number of a small size offspring, oysters, pelagic fishes, while other produce a small number of a large size offspring, that is in birds and mammals. So which is desirable for maximizing fitness? Ecologists suggest that life history traits of organisms have evolved in relation to the constraints imposed by abiotic and biotic components of the habitat in which they live. Evolution of a life history traits in different species is currently an important area of research being conducted by the ecologist. Population interaction. Can you think of any natural habitat on Earth that is inhabited just by single species? There is no such habitat, and such a situation is even inconceivable for any species. The minimal requirement is one more species on which it can feed. Even a plant species which make its food cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down organic matter in soil and return the inorganic nutrients for absorption, and then how will the plant manage pollination without an animal agent? It is obvious that in nature, animal, plant and microbes cannot live in isolation, but interact in various ways to form a biological community. Even in minimal communities, many interactive linkages exist, although all may not be readily apparent. Interspecific interaction arise from the interaction of population of two different species. They could be beneficial, detrimental or neutral, neither harm nor benefit to one of the species or both. Assigning a positive sign for beneficial interaction, negative sign for detrimental and 0 for a neutral interaction. Let us look at all the possible outcomes of a interspecific interaction. Positive mutualism, negative competition, positive predation, positive parasitism, positive zero commensalism, and negative zero is amensalism. Both the species benefit in mutualism and both lose in competition in their interaction with each other. In both parasitism and predation, only one species benefit, parasite and predator respectively, and interaction is detrimental to the other species, that is host and prey respectively.